Welcome, Benjamin.
Thank you. Glad to be here. Thank you. Can everybody hear me okay? Everybody good? Good in the back? All right. Okay. Well, welcome to our talk on human estimation. Oh, clicker. There we go. Let me go back one. Humans in estimation, getting past our faults to plan accurately. Quick note about who I am. So I'm Benjamin Carcich. I am a former Army captain turned game producer. I was in the Army for 4 years, stateside in the U.S. and also overseas. And after that, I joined Riot as a producer. I was there for a little over 8 years. I did all kinds of stuff. I did content pipelines, I did back-end tools pipelines, I did platform teams, I did R&D with Valarin. So I had a really good time, was there for quite a while. After I left, I wanted to get into a place of talking to leaders and producers and helping them be more successful. I see it as a huge opportunity and area for improvement across game dev. When I joined, and I think this is still true, there weren't a ton of resources. So now I've got Building Better Games going. It's my own little, I don't know, what do you want to call it, consultancy. And I'm just trying to capitalize on the opportunity. I think better leaders make better games, and that's what I'm here to do. So next one. Okay, I want to also talk and honor the primary source for a lot of the material I'm going to be covering. If any of you like reading books, this one is very dry and boring, but also has some real insight in it. How to Measure Anything by Douglas W. Hubbard. He's got a website for it. I threw that up there as well. But this is the primary source. Chapter 5, actually, of this book is where a lot of my original ideas for this workshop came from. With that, we're going to get into the first calibration test. Okay, so this test is done without your phones, without talking to each other. What I'm asking you for, so if everybody flips over the 2 sheets of paper in front of them, you should see these 2 sheets, calibration test round 1 and true-false round 1. And what I want you to do is give me a 90% confidence interval on the calibration test part. So you give me a lower and upper bound for what you think the answer could be. Okay? In other words, you're not trying to get it exactly right. You're giving me an upper and lower bound, 90% confidence interval. You're also going to go through the true-false. And on the true-false, what I want you to do, mark whether you think the statement is true or false, and then give me your confidence that you are correct. Your confidence should not be less than 50% because it's a coin flip, so it can't go lower. You should do the other one. If you think you're only 20% confident, that means you're 80% confident in the other one. And it can go all the way up to 100%. You're absolutely sure that that is correct. The last thing I'll say, some of you are at tables. Hopefully you have at least 2 people at your table. If anybody's sitting alone, please move to a table with other people. If they have room, you can have almost as many as you need at a table. But if anybody's alone, move to another table. We will be doing some team stuff in the second round, but don't worry about that for right now. I just want to make sure everybody's seated right. So with that, go ahead and get started. Calibration test round 1. Go ahead, 90% confidence interval, upper bound, lower bound, true falses, give me your confidence, and I will be grading you after that. So we have about 10 minutes for this, and I'll let you know when there's a couple minutes left. Any questions? Anybody unsure about what they're doing? Yes? Oh, do we need one more? One more here for round 1? Yeah, I got 10 minutes. Real quick check, if you have some of the true-false round ones that have the answer on them, that is not right. Just don't look at that, please. So there was a printing, something went wrong on that. So if you're one of those people, let me know. We'll get you another one real quick. But hand in your true-false. Okay, we got a couple. 1, 2, 3. Oh, boy, we got a bunch. All right. Focus on the other one for now. Thank you. Yeah. Yep. Here. Okay. Yeah. There's a lot. So. And if we don't get another one to you, if you can read it up front, go ahead and just use a blank sheet of paper. You can just write 1 true, your confidence interval. So yeah, don't look at the true falses. Yeah, I'll take this one. All right.
So if you have received a sheet with answers already, what you could do is you could probably fold it like this and be honest as much as you can. Thanks to her, she gave me this idea.
About 5 minutes to go. And if everybody finishes early, if your whole table's done, just let me know. And then if we get everybody done early, we'll keep moving before. But you have 5 minutes if you're still really working it. Okay, 1 minute left. You are 90% of the way to your 90% confidence intervals. Almost there. All right, some of you are still working. Got 10 seconds. And then if you want to, you can keep working it. Don't stress it too much. Quite a range of when people finish. Some people were done in like 30 seconds. And other people going right up to the line, just like any good exam. All right, we're going to call that there. So pencils down on that one. Let's talk about humans and estimation. I asked for a 90% confidence interval. One of the things that is very true about humans, we are rarely calibrated estimators. When I said that, most people, one, tend to believe whatever they wrote down, and two, don't think a lot about what 90% confidence intervals actually mean. So you gave answers, but odds are you were using a lot of intuition as you did that. And as a result of this, a lot of the shortcuts we take as humans, we end up being people who aren't very good intuitively at estimating. Some of that's system factors, some of that's just you being humans. The time pressure I put you under with 10 minutes also had an impact. All those things are replicated often in game dev, where all those things are true when you're doing game dev, when you ask a team to estimate. But how are we bad estimators? Well, about 80% of people are overconfident estimators. Again, Dr. Hubbard, he studied this. Most human beings tend towards overconfidence. My experience in game development is almost all game developers are overconfident estimators. I don't know why that worked out. That's a study for somebody else to dive into. But that means that the rest are mostly underconfident estimators. They're people who believe that things are, they're going to go worse than they thought, or it's going to take longer than it really will. Very, very, very few are actually calibrated. And by calibrated, I mean when you estimate something to a confidence interval, it tends to come true about that amount of the time, because that's what it means to be a calibrated estimator. Two professions that are actually quite good at this: bookies and odds makers. Two professions that are notably terrible at this. And sorry for some of you out there, because I'm guessing we have some in the room: CEOs and doctors. CEOs and doctors are really bad at this. And when you think about why, if you're a bookie or an odds maker and you're bad at estimating, you're bad at predicting what's going to happen in terms of your confidence around things, you go broke really fast. You're not going to last in that job. But when you think about doctors and CEOs, often the predictions they make about the future, they only get answers to that years or months later. The doctor might see, 1,000 patients a year, thousands of patients a year. Someone comes in, says, this is what your condition is, this is how long it's going to take to resolve it, whatever it might be. They don't get feedback on whether they were correct or not. They don't have that opportunity to learn. Most of us don't. And there's a lot that goes into that. So let's keep going. Let's review the results. What I want you to think about is, what were the patterns in your answers? And, I'll actually ask the second one later. So first, here are the answers. Because the true-false round one was a bit of a crazy, we had the wrong one printed for you guys. That's my fault. Let's focus on the calibration test. Here are the actual answers. What I want you to do is just go through and mark whether you got it right or wrong. And if you can't read that, let me know. Can everybody read that? If you can't read that, I'll read them out. Yeah? Anybody need me to read it? What? Oh, okay. Oh, they can see in the back. Okay, great. So yeah, just go through and mark for both. If you did the true falses, great. Just mark if you got it right or wrong. That's all that matters. Did you get it right or wrong? Don't worry about how far off. And by the way, to get it right means that it was inside of your upper and lower bound for the calibration test part. And for the true false, it means you match. Now, I have a question for you as you're going through. I asked you for a 90% confidence interval. I'm curious, did you feel any pressure when you gave an answer that you keep a tight range? That like, hey, I need to have a range that seems reasonable around this. Did anybody experience that? Yeah. Okay. It's interesting because I didn't put that pressure on you. I just asked for your 90% confidence. But when you hear someone ask for a question, when you hear someone ask you for a prediction or an estimate or something like that, you will think a lot about, well, what's a reasonable range to give? And what that tends to push you towards is being overly precise in your answers. Okay, has everybody graded at least the first 10, the calibration test? Who got 10 out of 10? Okay, hasn't happened yet, still hasn't happened. So if you'd gotten 10 out of 10, again, the sample size is really small. We would say that you were an underconfident estimator on this calibration test. Who got 9 out of 10? Yep, okay, so we're running to par on this so far. If you'd gotten 9 out of 10, we would have said you were a calibrated estimator. I asked you for a 90% confidence interval. That means your prediction would come true 9 times out of 10 on average. But, you know, anecdotal, so, and this is very small sample size. So how about 8 out of 10? Oh, we got one 8 out of 10. So we have a possible calibrated estimator. Congratulations. Round of applause for our possible calibrated estimator. Okay, 7 out of 10. 7 out of 10. Not bad at all. 6 out of 10. Okay, starting to see more. 5 out of 10. 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Don't worry, you're not the first. Okay. So I asked you for a 90% confidence interval. One person was close. Maybe 2. I'd give you the 7 out of 10. That's pretty close. Most of you were pretty far from a 90% confidence interval. So your goal was 90. That would have meant, again, confidence interval 90%. We don't think about that. We're often asked about what's our confidence, what's our confidence interval. We don't actually go, well, what would it mean for this to be right 9 times out of 10? We give an answer, and then if the answer feels like it's too broad or too vague, let's say because it's properly acknowledging the uncertainty, we tend to retreat and make it more precise. Did anybody do that? Were they like, shoot, I have no idea. Oh, well, and then you put a range that's like 10 wide, right? And it's like, well, it could be 1,000,000, it could be 0, but that's not helpful. That's not a helpful answer, we'll tell ourselves. We're going to go more into that in a bit. Let's talk about true-false. Okay, so true-false is different. This one is actually much more about the confidence. So did everybody mark down which ones they got true and which ones they got false? Okay, so what we're going to do in this, sorry, you're going to have to do some math. I want you to find your average confidence. The way you do that, you take whatever percentage you put down and you turn it into a decimal, and you add all those decimals up. So in this case, it's 0.9, 0.7, 0.8, et cetera, all the way down, equals 8.1. So what that means is I predicted in this example that I was going to get about 80%. So 8 of the 10 I think I would be correct on. My average confidence was 80%. So that's my guess. And then what you do with that is you compare it to how many you actually got right. So if my average confidence was 80%, I should have gotten 8 out of 10. In this case, I got 6. That's not too far off, but it's not close either. People sometimes do much better on this one. So I'll be curious to see as you again do the math, and let me know if you have any questions. I know this one is a little bit trickier to grade, and since you're doing self-grading, just let me know if anybody needs help with that. So as you're working this out, is anybody right on? Anybody get like confidence and actual number correct? We're spot on. You got it pretty close. Was it close or was it you were pretty much right on?
Pretty much right.
Yeah. What was your average confidence?
9.2.
9.2, and you got 9 right?
10.
You got 10 right. Okay. Okay. Close. That's pretty close. So that was he's within 0.8. Anyone else? Anyone else like within 1? Got a couple back. Okay. Ooh, our calibrated estimator. Oh man. Okay. So I've never seen someone do well on both simultaneously. So that's the first time. Congratulations. Anybody within 2 or 3? Yeah, I tend to see a lot more. Anybody really far off? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. By the way, if you're a product manager, I hate to pick on product managers. 1, product managers almost always finish really fast, and 2, they're almost always awful at this. I think it's because in some ways they view themselves as mini CEOs, and they're like, I'm that mini CEO. Okay, I gotta have good answers, and I gotta have sharp, fast answers. All right. Let's see. Just keep going. So let's talk about what we were doing when we were talking about that 90% confidence interval. I mentioned this already. People have an intellectual understanding of that, but our intuition overpowers us when we actually get asked a question, and we forget what the 90% confidence interval means. A bunch of things pop up. We want to be more precise than we need to be. We anchor it in our mind. We think, well, we don't know anything, but maybe it's like this. We start actually doing more guessing than really thinking through. And what we're trying to do is actually understand how much uncertainty is around the answer. This is where anybody, no matter how much you knew about Indian television series or what were some of the other questions, whether bees see red or not, whether you know anything about that or not, I deliberately took a lot of random topics that hopefully no one in here is like a Jeopardy person. They just like, oh, I just know all of them. Most people don't. And I'm actually asking you that no matter who you are, no matter how expert you are, no matter how much studying you've done, you all had the opportunity to estimate well. And I think this is true when we do game development as well, when we ask our teams to estimate. The problem is, even when we know what we should be doing, we don't. We intuitively go the wrong way. So we get questions like this a lot. When we get asked a question, sometimes we go to a place where we'll respond with something like this. Did anybody read a question and have this be something that popped into your head? Yeah. This is rarely actually the case. When you look at confidence intervals, you are quantifying your own uncertainty. If we knew it exactly, we wouldn't be estimating. We'd be just giving the answer. We don't know it exactly, so we're quantifying uncertainty. An example from the book that Hubbard wrote was he asked a class that he was doing with this, what is the wingspan of a 747? And someone in the class basically responded like, I have no idea. And he said, you have no idea? And she said, I have no idea. No idea what the wingspan. He said, okay, no idea. Well, is it smaller than the Earth? Well, yeah. I mean, the wingspan of a 747 is smaller than the Earth. Okay, cool. Is it, I don't know, smaller than a football field? I don't know. Maybe. Could be smaller than a football field. Might be bigger. Well, is it smaller than a mile? What about a kilometer? And suddenly she realized she knew quite a bit about how long the wingspan of a 747 was. And you can go from the other side, too. Is the wingspan of a 747 wider than a plate? Yes. I mean, I guess you could have a really big plate, but, normal plate. Is it bigger than a car? Yes. Okay, so at some point you actually do know a range. And he walked her through it. The answer is it's 68.5 meters for a 747-8, but he walked her to a place where actually she gave a reasonable 90% confidence interval, even though she had no idea. We can all do this. We can all do this with just about any question you get asked. The key thing is, again, we're trying here with estimation to understand our uncertainty. So maybe some of you, I was a producer, maybe some of you have been producers. Someone asked you the question, I want a 90% confidence interval for when we're going to finish feature X or piece of content X or game Y or whatever it is. This is a very intuitive place that we tend to go. So let's say we're in January. We go, oh, OK, cool. You asked me for a 90% confidence interval. My 90% chance is that we'll be done. I think it's October. 10% chance it's after. That's what our intuition does very rapidly. We provide one answer to that. When I ask for a confidence interval, I'm not asking for one number. I'm asking for 2. We don't think about that. And honestly, neither did the person that asked us. They just said it because it sounded cool. This is incorrect. This would actually be what a 90% confidence interval would look like. 90% confidence interval would imply that there's a 5% chance that the feature would finish before, 90% chance it would finish in our band, and a 5% chance it would finish after. Often, when we're talking about a 90% confidence interval, we're really talking about half of an 80% confidence interval, which again would be 10, 80, 10. And usually, by the way, we're overly optimistic about that because of all the things that you guys just discovered about how you're not particularly calibrated as estimators. But this is what confidence intervals look like. They're ranges. And they're designed to help us understand uncertainty. The idea is we have a rough but hopefully accurate idea of when things will be done. A lot of you, you basically told me, hey, I sought precision when I was asked the question. I tried to be more precise than I could be, than I should be, because it didn't seem like it was helpful to have a range that was that wide. What I want you to start thinking about is it's more important to be accurate than precise when someone asks you for an estimate about something. We might have time to go into that towards the end, but we'll see. And actually having an accurate range is very helpful for us. We'll also talk about more there. So what I want you to do, first maybe takeaway for you, whenever you get asked for an estimate, you should think not just about the latest something might be done, which is where our mind goes, especially in game development, especially when we're estimating features of these sorts of things. You also want to understand when is the earliest it might finish. The reason I think this is important is often when you do this exercise, you discover that the latest you initially, because if someone asked you for a 90% confidence interval, and let's say you were in January and you said October, often when I go, well, what's the earliest it might finish, someone will respond like, oh, shoot, October. And I'm like, OK, so it can't, well, you either have a very tight range where you know it's going to happen in October, or you're actually not really being honest. But you probably wanted to give the earliest reasonable answer because you felt that pressure in that moment. And a lot of people do. You got to start thinking about ranges in your head. You can also teach your teams to do this. Now, this doesn't mean the person asking you wants this in a range. So I'm not going to tell you you have to go tell your boss or the CEO or the COO or whatever. You have to be like, oh, sorry, I only work in ranges now. That's not going to go well for you. Don't do that. You might be able to have that conversation with them at some point in your life. Great. The trust is there. But what I would say is if you start thinking about it as what's the earliest, what's the latest, and then actually give them the latest version, that will answer their question. They might not like the answer, but at least you've given them an honest answer that is attempting to be accurate. And again, what if I don't know? We feel a desire to know. The school systems we all were raised in were very focused on us giving right answers, precise, right answers. So you were either right precisely or you were wrong. The reality is you can be right, but roughly, and that's better than being precisely wrong. So this isn't about having the right answer. It's about understanding uncertainty. I'm going to go over a somewhat complicated tool. Hopefully I can walk you through it. That's going to help you do this. It's called the equivalent bet test. So let's go back again to that thing. Imagine you were asked, when will feature X finish? But your boss came to you and upped the ante. They really wanted this to be a good guess. They were really, really hoping that your estimate was strong. And they said, look, you're going to give me a 90% confidence interval on that. What if I told you if your estimate was correct, you're going to win 100,000 rupees? OK? But if it was incorrect, you'd win nothing. One thing that a lot of you, if I'd actually done that, while you were going through those 10 questions, and I'd said, hey, if you get all these right, you get 100,000 rupees. My guess is a lot of your ranges would have gotten a lot wider really fast. And the reason for that is as soon as we involve money, even imaginary money, it makes us better calibrated estimators. Think again about those odds makers and those bookies that are good at this. OK, so we're going to take advantage of that. Now imagine there was a game show. So we have something called Wheel of Fortune in the United States. I don't know if you have an equivalent show in India or if you're familiar with Wheel of Fortune, but they like spin a big wheel and it's got a bunch of options on it. Imagine you had that game wheel. And so this thing, you had this one and it's just got two options on it. The red, you spin that wheel, it means you win the 100,000 rupees. But if it lands in blue, that's your chance of winning nothing, OK? I want to combine these two scenarios. Imagine your boss came to you and they said, hey, I've got this wheel you can spin. 90% chance, because that's what this is, 90% is red and 10% is blue. 90% chance you win 100,000. Or you can pick your range. You can pick your range and you can say, if your estimate range is correct, you're going to win 100,000. If it's incorrect, you win nothing. Now, you can only pick one of these two sides. Which would you choose? And a lot of people go, oh, I'm spinning that wheel. That's because you're an overconfident estimator. Your range was insufficiently wide. Some of you might go to a place where they say, oh, shoot, I'll definitely take my range. I mean, I put between 5 minutes from now and the end of the heat death of the universe. Like, so I'm definitely going with that one. We're going to be right. So I'm not spinning that wheel. Again, underconfident estimator. If you did this right, they would be equally appealing. If you were actually 90% calibrated as an estimator, and this was a 90% confidence interval, you would not care what you choose. So this you can use. You can do this exercise in your head, because I'm going to be asking you for 90% confidence intervals in your head. And you can think, OK, as I'm writing down my answers, would I rather spin the wheel? And if it lands red, I get 100,000 rupees? Or would I rather guess that my range is correct? And if you're like, oh, I definitely spin the wheel, widen your range. And keep widening it until you're not really sure. You're not really sure which one you'd want to do. Again, equivalent bet test. This is one way, taking advantage of how humans respond to money, some of the psychology around this, you're forcing yourself to think more thoroughly about the problem that you've been given and how to estimate. So, remember again, whenever we're estimating, we're trying to understand our own uncertainty. We could ask this question. Something else you can do, let's say you had a bunch of these. So we go all the way from 50% to 90%. One thing you can do is look at your range when you've given a range. And by the way, you can go lower than 50% too, as I'm sure. I've given estimates that were lower than 50% confident. I'm not proud of it. I've totally done it. Because I just felt that in the air that I needed to say 3 months, even though it was more like 18. And it's just like, but any other answer wasn't going to be OK. So it was like, I guess 3 months, and we'll figure it out later. We'll sunk cost fallacy our way to the completion of this project. But think about these ranges, and think about the ranges you're giving. You can compare, and you can actually say, when would I rather spin the wheel versus when would I rather go with my range that I've estimated? Again, you can just do this in your head. And I've been shocked at how this alone can help someone when I've asked them for a 90% confidence interval. I throw that in front of them, and I'm like, hey, would you rather spin the wheel or go with your range? And they'll be like, oh, I'm spinning the wheel. And I'm like, OK, let's widen that range. OK, uncertainty. We get asked these questions. I'm a producer. I've gotten asked these questions a lot. When will that be done? How many people will that take? How long will the outage? How much will it cost? All the different questions we get asked as leaders and producers in game development. Well, now we know the first thing we need to do, we need to understand how much uncertainty there actually is, and then we need to provide an answer that honestly acknowledges that uncertainty, rather than what we often intuit or expect to say in the room. There are reasons for many of us to tend to be overconfident. It's not just for ourselves or because we're bad at estimating. When we provide specific, precise answers, it makes everybody in the room feel better, including ourselves. There's a part where it goes like, oh, but you know, we had this huge range, but like, I don't like, you know what, let's just pretend it's small. This has a bunch of problems because what it actually says is I'm not going to acknowledge how much uncertainty is around this. And we do this a lot in game development. When we pretend that, there's no drive to improve the numbers. There's no drive to reduce the uncertainty because they asked us how long that feature was going to take. We said 6 months. Or we said 6 to 8 months. And they were like, good, that's good enough. If we'd actually done the equivalent bet test, we might have said 8 to 24 months. But nobody wanted that answer. We all feel better when we just say 6 to 8. We all feel much more comfortable with that. But it's wrong. And so we're sticking our head in the sand. We're not acknowledging our uncertainty. But when we acknowledge the uncertainty, we get super uncomfortable. Human beings relate to uncertainty by basically our emotional response is anxiety. Anxiety is something that our brains are triggered to resolve. Simplest way to do that in the room when you're estimating is to give an overly precise answer. Even though if everybody knows it's wrong, we're all still happier. But it's wrong, and it's not actually helping us get where we're trying to go. As a result, we might prioritize the wrong things. We might choose the wrong projects. We might pick one feature over another because we think it's going to not take as much time, and then it takes even more time. I've seen all this stuff happen. And this is doubly hard in game development because most people aren't used to thinking about things in terms of ranges. They're not used to thinking about things in terms of any sort of roughness. We want precise answers. And so you end up in this space where, like this person, there's a missing piece of the puzzle, and you feel responsible for it because you were asked to estimate. And then we pass that on to our teams. We ask them to estimate. And they're left staring at the missing piece of the puzzle. And so they give overly precise answers too. We want to give them more precise answers. We have to rein in that tendency, because otherwise we end up like this. We pretend there is less uncertainty. We provide the precision people and ourselves want, and in so doing we fail to acknowledge reality. And again, we consider the wide range of an actual real answer, and then we go, that's too wide to be useful. But it's true. Any other answer is the less useful one. The true answer will be the most useful one. When we ground ourselves in reality, we are always better off because we get to be in reality, not a fantasy land. And yet everybody wants the fantasy answer. Okay, we're going to do a second calibration test. So on your tables, there should be a pile that says 2 on it. Everybody get one of each of those pieces of paper. You're going to do this exact same test again with different questions. Same thing, calibration test part 1 and true false. And the point of this is self-reflection. I want to be really clear about this because I think some people, there's a way to cheat this test, right? I asked you for a 90% confidence interval. You're supposed to get 9 out of 10 correct. So what you do is you find a question, and you give an obviously wrong answer, and then you put negative infinity to positive infinity on all the other 9. Congratulations, you got 9 out of 10. This is not actually helping you learn about how you relate to uncertainty. So I get it. You can cheat the test. Fantastic. You could do the same thing with a true false. You just put 50% and guess randomly. You know, on average, you'll be about right. What I want you to do is actually think about what's going on for you. So we're going to do calibration test round 2, and I want you to remember the equivalence bet test as we go through this, okay? I want you to think about that. I asked you for 90, that's this one. So think about, would I rather take my answer, my range I've given, or would I rather spin that wheel and hope it lands red? And see if you can make them about the same. See if you can make those equally appealing as you go through this. And it's going to be weird because you're going to feel bad. You're going to give some ranges that are so wide, you're like, that's ridiculous. It's not. It's the honest understanding of your own uncertainty. So there's your test. Go ahead and get started on calibration test round 2. Let me know if you got any questions. About 3 minutes left. 3 minutes left on this one. Don't worry if you don't get through all the true falses. Make sure you get through the calibration test round 2. So. One minute left. Last minute. Again, make sure you're getting done with the calibration test. Don't worry as much about the true falses. 90% confidence interval. Okay, that's 10. What was that like? How was that different? Anybody?
We are broadening our range of thoughts, right? We are not trying to focus on the exact value. We are trying to make sure that the chances of correct answer is more.
Yeah.
The range increases by a lot.
A lot, yeah. So for you, range just decreased. To hit that 90% confidence, you were just like, I got to widen.
Yes.
Yeah. Anyone else? Did anybody write down numbers and we're kind of thinking like, these are absurd? Yes. But, yeah. But it was like, but that was real? That was like, yeah, okay.
We're not under any time pressure.
Mm-hmm.
There's no time limit for this round 2.
You mean the 10 minutes you had plenty of time?
No, I think we didn't have time.
Oh, you didn't have time pressure?
Yeah.
You didn't feel that? Okay.
I didn't feel that.
Yeah, interesting.
In your example, you say the motivation was money, but here the motivation was that whether I learned the concept or not.
Yeah.
So that.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to up the difficulty a little bit for you all. You have somewhere on your table another version. It's the same thing, exact same set, the calibration test round 2. You are now going to spend the next few minutes coming up with one set of answers for this as a table. So talk amongst your table. You keep your own individual ones, but talk amongst your table and just do that one page, just those 10 questions. What is the upper and lower bound of your table after some discussion? Now remember, you don't have a ton of time. So you got to keep moving through those questions as a group. It's tough. Keep moving. Five minutes left. Should be halfway through. 5 minutes left.
Potato, some question is there. Best thing answer black market.
3 minutes. 3 minutes left. 3 minutes. 1 minute. 1 minute. Finish up. Finish up as your table. We'll see. Keep going. Keep going. Someone's asking for 2 minutes. We're running out of time. We're running out of time. Okay, we're in your bonus minute. Bonus minute. Keep going, almost done. 1 minute now, 1 minute, bonus minute. Ten seconds. Put something in there. Put something in. We got to keep rolling. Okay, pencils down. Pencils down. We are done. Okay, I know I got one table that complete. Any other tables get all 10? We got one more. Any other tables in the back? Okay. Any other tables get all 10? You guys got all 10 done? Good job. Okay. All right, for those that are still going, we're going to pause. We're going to pause. All right. Good job. What was that like? Did anybody learn anything new from somebody else at the table? Yeah? Well, let's go ahead and review the results. All right. Let's see. So go ahead and go through. What I want you to do, somebody mark it for the team's table or the team's results, and then also go through your own individual ones. And I want to know, we're going to go through the same thing. I'm going to ask, did anybody get 10? Did anybody get 9? And then I'm going to ask after that where the tables landed, okay? See, now you're invested when you read these answers. You're like, wait a minute, why did you say? Okay, anybody get 10? Anybody as an individual, did anybody get 10? You got 10? All 10 right? For the calibration test, the 90% confidence interval. You got 10? Anybody 9? 9, got a 9? Now remember, 10 means potentially underconfident, small sample, but good job. What about 8? Okay? We have more 8s. We have more 8s. We've got more 8s, 9s, and 10s. That's really good because again, 9 would be perfect. 7. Couple 7s. 6. How many people got 6 individually? How many people got 5? Okay. How many people got 4? Okay. 3. Still a bunch of 3s. 2. Okay. 1. Got a 1. 0. All right. Did anybody do better than they did last time? Did anybody do worse? Yeah, interesting, huh? You knew it, you were thinking about it, maybe you were even doing the test, but you still, I had an engineering manager who was part of my leadership team when I was on the sustainability initiative on League of Legends, and he did this test, and we did this, I think I did this with him 3 times. He went through 3 different tests, which is what we'll do today. And I'm not kidding, I think he got worse every time, and he could not understand it. And it was really interesting, though, to kind of ponder that and go, what's going on with you as you relate to uncertainties? I keep trying to make it wider, but I guess I'm really not doing it right. And he wasn't. And it was an interesting thing to have him practice. Okay, on the true false, was anybody really accurate? Was anybody like, hey, my confidence, actually, it might take some time if you need to go math that out.
My confidence is 77%, I scored 8.
Nice job. So we had 7.77% confidence, average confidence, and got 8. That's fantastic. So anybody else get really close? Yeah? 7.6 and 7. Nice. Anybody really far? Anybody still really far?
Confidence level 90% and
90% got 5. Yeah.
7. It was 9. Now it went down to 7.
Now it was 9. Now it goes down to 7. Yep. Yep. Okay. I want to know about tables. So, did any tables get 10? We got a table that got 10? Nice job. Any tables get 9?
10.
You got 10 here as well? Any tables get 9? 9? Calibrated table over there. Any tables get 8? Got 8? 7? Any tables get 7? Any tables get 6? Okay, a few 6s. 5? 4? 3? 2? Your table got 2? All right. 1? 0? Oh, you guys got 1? What happened to your calibrated estimator? Oh, you got 5. Oh, okay. All right. Okay. All right. Quick question for you. So usually what happens, somebody grabs the piece of paper and starts writing. Do you think you would have had a different set of answers, whether you would have gotten more right or less right, if somebody else had grabbed a piece of paper and started writing? Were you able to all discuss every single one? Okay, good. All right, so one of the things that generally happens, and I think we did see it here actually, the tables tend to do better than the individuals. This kind of makes sense. There are some disadvantages to the tables in that you took the same amount of time basically to do half the number of questions. But, you were more accurate. It's a trade-off when you're estimating. The more people I involve and the more they understand what they're trying to do in terms of confidence interval, the more likely somebody in there is going to be right if everybody can be heard. But it's time-consuming. You have to share information. Was anybody incredibly confident at any table and everybody was like, okay, you seem to know what you're talking about, and you ended up being wrong? Yeah? So fortunately, that never happens in game development. Just kidding. So this is something that really happens, though, where we'll anchor, we'll do this as a group, and someone will be like, oh, don't worry, I know the answer to that. And everybody's like, oh, thank heavens, they know the answer. And they'll be like, here's the answer. And then you'll find out they did not know the answer. They certainly thought they did. They convinced everybody at the table they did. They were incredibly confident, charismatic, composed, and wrong. That can all be true at the same time. So let's talk about pitfalls and tools. We've talked about the equivalent bet test. That's a good start. And I asked you to use that this last time. I'm going to give you some more tools you can use to estimate better. And I'm also going to talk about some of the common pitfalls. You're probably familiar with some of these. But the tools, some of the tools I'm going to talk about in terms of how they resolve the common pitfalls human beings encounter. So first, let's talk about why our intuition messes us up when it comes to estimation. And again, this is estimating how long something is going to get done or making a guess about something, anything we don't know. Why are we not good at understanding how much uncertainty we have as we go into trying to answer a question? 2 very common individual pitfalls. One is called anchoring. Anybody here heard of anchoring before? Yes, this is why if you've ever done any sort of scrum or system like that where everybody's doing the poker planning, the scrum master gets really mad when someone always puts their number up too fast. And they're like, oh, here's a 13. They throw the 13 up, and everybody's like, well, now you just anchored everybody to a 13. The whole point was we all put the numbers up at the same time when we're doing poker planning in Scrum, so we don't anchor each other. But the way anchoring works, it's whatever number happened to be around your brain that you happen to see, that somebody said, anything like this will anchor your number. And I actually was in a class once. They asked us, they were illustrating this concept. They asked, I think it was, how tall are the redwood trees of California? And they told us very clearly, here's a number. It's unrelated to this question. And they gave one group the number 600 and one group the number 100. And they were like, don't worry, it doesn't relate to the question. Don't worry about that number, just a number. And it was on the page where we were writing it. The people who saw 600 all tended to have higher estimates by a pretty decent chunk. I was one of the ones that got the higher number. I think we were all like around 450 was our average. The ones who got 100, their average was like 250. Even when we know or are told that the number we saw as an anchor has nothing to do with what we're doing, we still can't avoid subconsciously just integrating that into whatever that estimate is. This happens all the time. And by the way, if I ask someone, if you'd asked me after I did that Redwoods test, if you'd asked me like, hey, did the number 600 impact your estimate at all? I would have said, no, you told me not to think about it. It doesn't matter. I didn't think it was impacting things. It was. So this is what an anchor is. There's another one, they actually did a study on this. I have to read this out because it's a crazy study. The name of the study is the Hypothesis-Consistent Testing and Semantic Priming in the Anchoring Paradigm, a Selective Accessibility Model by Musweiler and Strack. But they asked what percentage of African nations are in the UN? And then they anchored the group 65%, 10%. Same thing happened. Almost same numbers, just as percentages. The group that was anchored to 65% said 45. Those that were anchored to 10 said 25. So even when it's not at all related, we can't avoid anchoring. Okay, second thing I want to talk about. We select a number and we add and subtract a value. Sometimes this goes along with anchoring. We'll get anchored to a value. But have you ever had a producer or been a leader where someone asked you how long something was going to get done, and maybe you were working in sprints or iterations or whatever, and you were like, that's probably about 5 sprints, but I'll say 4 to 6 to sound smart. We do this a lot. That's 10. 10. 8 to 12. 8 to 12. Plus minus 2. So we do this, and we think we're actually widening the range in a reasonable way. We think we're going towards having a higher confidence. Like, well, I'm giving them a range, right? I'm following all the rules. No, you're not. It's actually just a bunch of nonsense. You made it up in your head. Maybe you should actually be going -1 plus 10. But you didn't think about that because your brain shortcutted to, I've got a number I think that's right, and I'm just going to expand around that number. When we did the first test, how many of you did that? Even on the second test. You picked a number, and you just expanded around it. I don't know, I'll just go plus minus 500. That seems like a good range. That sounds right. This is a very, very fast, intuitive thing we do. Right? This is in the fast thinking part of our brain. And we don't realize that actually we haven't quantified our uncertainty at all. But now that we've got a range, we think we have. We've tricked ourselves into thinking that whatever that number is a reasonable guess. Some group pitfalls. So these ones, you're probably all familiar with it. They actually, what they do is they tend to lead to things like anchoring. But you've got the idea, there's this loudest voice idea. Maybe it's the most charismatic person, the most respected, the one that gets really annoying to deal with if you tell them that they're wrong. Like whatever it might be, all of these can happen in a group setting. So somebody who's the loudest voice when you're in the group takes over. And they basically do all the estimates. And everybody else kind of gets cut out. A subtly different version of this is the most expert. Now, the problem with the most expert is it's really tricky. If I asked this room, well, and now you all know you could actually give me a 90% confidence interval around this, how long does it take me to drive to my in-laws? Now, if I was at the table, you'd probably all defer to me on that one. Because your ranges are, I don't know where you live, I don't know where your in-laws live, and I don't know what that drive is like. I do know all those things, and so I could give a much, probably more precise answer that would still be accurate than all of you. You could still give accurate answers, but it would make sense to trust the expert. I'm the expert on where my family lives. We do this because there is some truth to it. But one of the things we've discovered as we've studied estimation is that when you have that person who's most expert, sometimes that happens, but sometimes the opposite happens. They actually did this thing where they had groups of people pretend to have crash landed with an expert. Some teams had an expert and some teams did not. Somebody who had some amount of training in survival scenarios. And they said, hey, your plane's crash landed. You're the only 5 people that survived. Here's the circumstances. What do you do that maximizes your chance of survival? The teams that had the expert did worse. Because what happens is the expert says, don't worry, everyone. I know what I'm doing. Now, if you had them all as individuals and said, all of you survive on your own, the experts probably would have averaged better. But the expert is still just one person. And when the groups that had no expert had to talk about what was the best thing, they didn't basically share all the experts' blind spots. They got to discuss and understand what was going, okay, cool, what do you see? What do I see? How do we all think of what would be smart here? And even though they didn't have that one expert, they did better without it because they were able to listen to each other because no one was able to see judgment to the expert and no expert was able to just take away and go like, look, I'm in charge. I know what I'm doing. Just follow me. That's how we survive. So, loudest voice, most expert. These are group fallacies. They're pitfalls we run into. Very fast, very intuitive. We don't even realize it's happening half the time. How do we avoid them? Let's talk about the tools. Sorry, this one's a smidge delayed, but it catches up. Okay, so 2 pros and 2 cons. Simple thing to do. When you create the estimate with your range, right? I ask you the question. I say 90% confidence interval. You go, this is my low bound, this is my high bound. Then you pause and you go, what are 2 reasons this might be true and what are 2 reasons it might be false? This pushes back against the expert fallacy, the loudest voice and the expert fallacy pretty strongly. It breaks you out of the intuitive thinking. It breaks you out of the ±2 type of thing. And some questions that I like to think about, again, where you are in game dev may be different, but are you thinking about competitors if that's present in your space? If you're doing an estimate that involves competitors, are you thinking about variance in teams? Are you thinking about the busyness of dependent teams? Are you thinking about the time it will take to try something and fail? A lot of times when we're doing planning in game development, we tend to create a plan that assumes everything will work on the first try, even though everybody in game development knows that nothing ever works on the first try. But we still make that plan and then we pretend it's real. And then we're always late. So we always got to work harder. We got to figure it out. We got to crunch. We got to crush quality. All these things happen. Where imagine if that team could instead go like, well, how many times do we usually have to retry something? And it's some number between, hey, sometimes it's 0. Most of the time it's more. Sometimes it's like, let's say an average of 1 to 5. Sometimes it's 10. Sometimes it's 20. Sometimes we give up on that thing because we couldn't solve it if it was some design thing we were trying to get right. It wasn't worth the time anymore. Doing 2 pros and 2 cons can help with this. And it's just asking questions like, why are you likely to be accurate? By the way, one thing that happens when you ask this question, when you go, because almost always you'll come up with cons really fast. Because as soon as I ask you to come up with 2 reasons your range might be wrong, you go like, oh man, there's a bunch of reasons. Like there's tons of variance in the world. Sometimes I've asked people, well, tell me some reasons why your answers, why your range is correct. And they're like, I don't have any. And I'm like, maybe it should be wider. Right? Maybe you weren't too precise. Because you should actually have some idea. And so this is just, 2 pros, 2 cons, 1 technique. Helps you understand what you're thinking about, fights the group fallacies really strongly. Because the experts have to answer this, and suddenly they realize they have blind spots. The other one is bounds as breakpoints. So remember that scenario where we're in January, and I asked 90% confidence interval. And so someone came out, and they said, like, May to October. What you actually do, so anchoring is that thing where we're going to find a number, we're just going to put it somewhere. Or we're going to, the plus-minus fallacy also is going to be like, I pick a number, and then I go around it. Instead, let's look at each bound alone. So instead, I didn't just ask you 1 question, I asked you 2 questions. First question I asked you is, what's the earliest that thing might be done? Answer that question first. Give me the line at which 95% of the time it's going to be after this. Don't worry about the other side of this. Just focus there. By doing this, it really pushes again against anchoring. It pushes against that idea of somebody said a number, or it pushes against that idea of I found a center number and I just expanded around it. So then, once I answer that first question, I go on to the second. And I realize that every time someone asks me an estimation question, they've actually asked me 2. What's the earliest it might be done? What's the latest it might be done? I give both of those, I think through both of those answers, and then depending on who the person is and how much they're trained in this stuff, maybe I just give them the later one, but I now have more confidence that the later one is real. what you end up with is a 90% confidence interval. I actually have confidence now. I've thought through that particular each bound, and now I can say that there's a 95% chance it finishes before October, a 95% chance it finishes after May, with a 5% on each end. Okay, this one is an extreme version. This is actually my favorite one. It's called the absurdity test. So you start with the ridiculous, the absolute ridiculous, and then you remove the absurd. So if you were to ask me, I don't know, how big is the largest moon of Jupiter? What? Do you know exactly what it is?
1 to infinity.
1 to infinity, right? Okay, so for me, let's say I was comparing it to other things. Well, is it smaller than the universe? Yes, smaller than the universe. Is it bigger than an atom? Bigger than an atom, okay. Is it bigger than a basketball? Yeah, it's bigger than a basketball. Pretty sure. Is it smaller than the solar system? Yeah, it's smaller than the solar system. And what you do is you progressively walk both ends back until it no longer feels absurd, until you can't justify moving it any further. This is my favorite one, because by starting at the ridiculous extreme, you actually anchor yourself to an outside range instead of an inside range. Like you anchor yourself to a broader total range, and then you have to pull it back, and you might be shocked at where it stops being absurd. I've had teams do this where we're looking at like, hey, how long might this project take? And everybody knows that the right answer is 3 to 6 months or something like that. But when we did the absurdity test, we can't pull it in past 3 years. Okay, well, we want to be able to pull it in past 3 years. Yeah, of course we do. But I can't. The absurdity test says I stop. And so my 90% confidence interval becomes quite a bit wider than I would have otherwise. So absurdity test, my favorite one. Now, I've talked a lot about uncertainty. Okay, we do want to reduce uncertainty. It is okay to do that. So what I'm not telling you is, hey, someone asks you a question, when will feature X be done? You do all the work, you do your equivalent bet test, you run it through the absurdity test, you're making sure you're not anchored and adding and subtracting, and that there wasn't a loudest voice fallacy with the group. You've done all those things, and now boom, this is my answer, that's the range, and that's it. No, that is not it. We are allowed to reduce uncertainty, but first remember, we have to acknowledge it to remove it. So we get all these questions. These questions pop up. When will that be done? Again, as a producer, I got these all the time. First thing we did, we actually tried to understand that uncertainty. Then we provided an answer that acknowledged that uncertainty. Then we used a couple of tools to validate. And then we asked, is this estimate good enough? Sometimes it is. Sometimes you're going to get to that 90% or whatever. Maybe your company wants 80% confidence interval. You may not need to do anything else. It might be a good enough number. Sometimes it's not, and you're actually like, hey, that number's too wide. Well, now we get to dive into that. Now we get to actually figure out how could we reduce that. And if you've never accepted what you don't know, you won't pursue understanding things better. I talked about that earlier. When we believe we have precise answers, even if they're wrong, they trick us all into thinking like, well, that's good enough. We'll never hit absolute certainty if it's an estimate. And in game development, when we're trying to predict the future, you're just not going to have absolute certainty about what's going to happen. But we can spend time reducing existing uncertainty. You just have to recognize it exists first. And now you can go and you can say, like, well, why is it uncertain? Wait a minute. Why can't, remember that 2 pros, 2 cons. Why can't I bring it in? What are the cons that are pushing me to make the boundary that wide, to make this range what it is? When you do this, when you provide the range and acknowledge a lot of uncertainty, it's not what people expect. They're going to want something more precise. Acknowledge that reducing the uncertainty will often take time. You're going to have to go have conversations. You're going to have to go talk to the teams that may be involved. You have to figure out, like, well, why is it that I can't bring it down? And this is a little bit like pushing out the fog of war in a strategy game. We start recognizing that there is a lot of fog of war, right? Our range is big. 90% confidence interval is wider than we want it to be. Okay, let's go out there and explore. Let's start asking questions. Let's see how we can bring it down. How do we reduce uncertainty around it? Sometimes there's easy things to explore. One of the things that's fascinating that Hubbard emphasized in the book, a lot of times people are like, I don't know how to reduce the uncertainty. We don't know anything. And he said, well, that's great. If you don't know anything, then almost anything will help you reduce the uncertainty. It's very easy to go from insane uncertainty to much, much better uncertainty, even if it's still wide. It's actually where it gets harder is when you're trying to go from, we're trying to get the range from like 3 weeks down to 1 week at a year in advance or something. That's really hard if you're doing project planning. Like that takes a lot of effort. It may not be possible. But if it was like, I don't know, it's going to take somewhere between a month and 5 years, okay, there's a few things we might learn that could probably dramatically tighten that up. It's time to change the environment around this. So this is one, sometimes we will find out that one of our bounds is unacceptable. That's like that scenario where, hey, everybody knew the right answer was 3 to 6 months, but the reality was the lower end of our, or the outer end of our range was like 3 years. Okay, well, we need it to be done before that because we're going to run out of money before 3 years, let's say. If we're going to run out of money before 3 years, that means we need to change the question. What do we de-scope? How do we make it tighter? Are there resources I can provide your team? If you, again, by acknowledging the uncertainty and by giving an honest answer, if, again, that can be acceptable inside of the context you're in, you can actually start going, well, what would make me be able to bring that down organizationally? Do I need people? Do I need tools? Do I need a clearer vision of what this is, a better understanding? Do I need more play tests with players so that I can validate that what we're doing is on the right track? Any of these things could actually bring down that outer range. You might say, like, look, I'm not really sure because we might go 2 years, put it in front of players, and then find out we need to go back and redo a bunch of stuff. Well, okay, let's do something really small, get it in front of players in 6 weeks or 3 months or whatever that is. Again, depending on your context, that's going to be different times. But now maybe we learn something really fast, and now we can turn that around. And as we do that, we can continually update that estimate. But we want to reduce the uncertainty, and sometimes we need to change our environment to do that. It's okay when we acknowledge a reality that the outcome may be not acceptable. That just means we need to change the circumstance we're in. All right, how do you become better calibrated? So we've been going through a couple of calibration tests with you all. You've all been doing a wonderful job with that. How do we improve at this? All right, Korean advice. So we've talked a ton about this, but one of the big things is to practice it. And there's different ways to practice it. Maybe you can get AI to generate you some of the tests that I just gave you, like, hey, give me 10 questions, 10 trivia questions, you know, and I'll don't give me the answers yet, and then I'll put some numbers in, whatever else. You can mess with that if you want to. But the big thing is also, when you make estimates, write them down. When you guess about what the future might do, guess your prediction. One of the things that's fascinating, they did a study with people who attempt to, well, they're experts in geopolitical realities, right? So they're looking at, like, okay, here's the world, here's all the countries, and they got asked questions like, you know, I don't know, is this country going to go to war with that country, or will there be a trade deal between here and here, or whatever? And so the survey, the people running the survey gave them all these questions. They came back to them years later, and they asked them, so how do you think you did? And they were all like, I think I did pretty well. They had not done pretty well. And when they asked them specific questions, hey, what did you say about this? They tended to respond, and we have to assume they were being honest, that they'd gotten it right. But when you looked at what they'd written, they'd gotten it wrong. And this is a really, like, this, I don't know, this is kind of creepy in some ways. Our minds rewrite the past for our own coherence. If I think I'm good at something, my mind is actually capable of going back and, like, adjusting the memory so I seem like I am, if I really believe that about myself. We all do this. And so what can be helpful related to this idea of just repetition and feedback and trying this is, hey, make a prediction about something that you think is going to happen at your game studio. Maybe it's an estimate, maybe it's something else. Write it down. Go back 6 months, or wait 6 months, go back and look at that. Did you get it right? And you might go like, oh, shoot. I'd kind of updated as I went without even realizing it, and I kind of thought I was right about this. It turns out I was wrong. This has happened to me. And it's kind of creepy because you're like, oh yeah, I know you said this number and blah, 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 blah. And then I go back and I look at the text conversation or whatever, and I'm like, no, you didn't. You didn't. I was wrong. But I was really confident. I was very confidently wrong. And that's one of the things that's interesting. There's a TED talk about this, but the difference between feeling right and feeling wrong is nothing. We only feel different when we discover we're wrong. But in the moment when we're there and we're saying, like, this is true, we could be totally wrong, but if we believe it, it feels the exact same as if we were right. We don't know the difference in the moment. You only change when you realize, like, when someone says, like, actually you're wrong, and then they prove it, and then you're like, oh, now I feel bad. Oh, okay, oops, I did that badly. So you take a calibration test, You write down your estimates. You can do this with your teams as well. Next thing you can do, I talked about the equivalent bet test. That'll help you improve. Put money in the even imaginary. It helps you understand. It helps you get a better picture of what your actual uncertainty is. We talked about 2 pros and 2 cons. Again, I like that one especially because if you have experts and loudest voices in the room, the 2 pros and 2 cons is particularly effective against that. Upper lower bounds is breakpoints, fights anchoring, fights plus minus, and my favorite, the absurdity test. If you do all these things, if you actually practice this stuff, what's fascinating is you can get better at estimating. That was also a really cool observation that Hubbard had. Some people got really good, but almost everybody improved. Everybody, like pretty dramatically, if you keep practicing this and you keep focusing. We're going to go into one more calibration test here. Okay, so you should have 3. There should be something with 3. There's going to be 2. There's going to be a 3A and a 3B. Take one of each. If you don't have them, let us know. But you should have a 3A and a 3B. So this one's going to be a 20-question test. I'm still asking you for a 90% confidence interval, but we're not going to do true falses this time. We're just doing the 90% confidence interval, 20 questions, upper and lower bound, which means that 18 would be direct on calibrated, or close enough, and around that is what you're going for. So that's how many you're trying to get right, is 18. You're hoping that 18, so you would expect 2 to be wrong if you were actually calibrated at 90%. Now, we're going to take the test individually first. And remember, don't try to win the test. Don't game it. It's easy to game. It's too easy to game. Keep understanding how you relate to uncertainty. And how, I'll be honest, like when I did this, it is so uncomfortable when I give those wide ranges. Like I just feel bad sometimes. When someone asks me a question that I really don't know that much about, and I give some giant range, I feel bad. I shouldn't. That's honest. That's real. That's true. So I want you to sit in that uncertainty and be okay with it. So here's your calibration test. I'm going to give you 10 minutes. Get started. If you got any questions, let me know. What? Sorry. Oh. Yeah, 3A and 3B. There should be like a calibration test round 3A and a calibration test round 3B. You do both of them. But no true false this time. As you're going through, think about absurdity test, think about 2 pros, 2 cons, equivalent bet, bounds as breakpoints. Watch out for your anchors, watch out for plus or minus a value. So one other thing, if someone finishes early on this, one thing you can do is go back, use some of the techniques against some of the ones you weren't sure about. So as you were kind of going through, maybe you were throwing 2 pros and 2 cons at one, and then you moved on to the next one or something like that. Go back, if you finish early, and throw another test at it. It's interesting how the different tests actually will push against different biases, and they all might reveal something a little bit different. Three minutes left. 3 minutes. Last minute. Last minute. Ten seconds. All right. All done. Now, we're going to do the team thing again, but we're going to do it differently this time. Okay? You're not going to talk about it with each other. All you're going to do, you should have a sheet for 3A and a sheet for 3B for each table. You are just going to take whoever had the lowest bound and whoever had the highest bound, and you're just going to put whatever those two numbers are. Okay? For within your team. Within your team. Just the highest and lowest. So whatever is the absolute lowest at your table, whatever is the absolute highest at your table, you're just putting those together. So this one shouldn't take as long. It's just copy paste. Table's still going. Any tables still going? What, last one? Last one here. Anybody else? Any other tables? Done, 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 done. Everybody's? Okay. Once they finish, we'll call it good. Okay. While they finish up, what was that like? Just not getting to talk about it, but just taking the highest and lowest number? What do you say?
It was a lesson in acceptance.
A lesson in acceptance. Yes, yes. Did yeah, yeah. Did anybody have anyone at the table where you were like, "What is wrong with you?" Yeah, yeah. That happens a lot too. And by the way, one of the things to think about, and we'll see how the answers go. I'm very curious how the answers go, because you're relatively large teams for this. When you're thinking that, one of the things might be that person did a really good job if they had a wide range of acknowledging uncertainty. They did a really good job, perhaps, of being honest. And then they had to tell you their number. Did you make them feel okay about that? And I say this as somebody in game development who's led estimation sessions with teams, and I've watched engineering leads make a junior engineer or a QA feel maybe a little dumb. Do you think they're going to acknowledge their uncertainty next time?
No.
So, something to keep in mind as we look at the answers. They may be doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing, and it may look absurd to you, but it's actually true for them. Maybe they just don't know that much about a bunch of random trivia. So keep that in mind as we're going. Because the other thing that can happen too, sometimes, and I've had this, someone who's like, everybody else is an idiot, I'm really smart, they do really badly, and everybody else was actually being quite a bit more realistic. So keep in mind as we look at the results, I'll be curious to see how the tables do. Because if you all actually did individually 90% confidence intervals, we should have a much greater than 90% confidence interval for that at the table. The probability that you all put exactly the same two numbers for all 20 questions is so close to zero, it's not important. And any increase in range to any of you means that your range should go up. So let's see how you did. So first track yourself as an individual. Go through it as an individual. Again, this one's going to be at a 20, so we're targeting 18. 18 would be 90% confidence interval, and then we're going to go to the table. And whoever finishes first at your tables, just go through and grade the team one. Anybody still grading? Everybody done grading themselves? Anybody still grading? No? Okay. Okay, who got 19 or 20? Anybody get 19 or 20 as an individual? Anybody get 19 or 20? Okay. Anybody get 17 or 18? 17 or 18? Oh man, we're getting worse as we go. Oh boy. All right. 15 or 16? Okay, we got good. 15 or 16? Got another one? Okay. 13 or 14? Nice. 11 or 12? A lot of 11 or 12. We're sitting right around 50% confidence interval, really, it seems like. 9 or 10? Yep. 7 or 8? Still a couple. 5 or 6? Okay. 3 or 4? All right. Very overconfident estimators. These are overconfident people. You want them on your team for the confidence. All right, wait, what did I just say? 3 or 4? 1 or 2? Anybody 1 or 2? Anybody 0? Okay, so we took out the bottom. Nice. All right. Way to go. Okay, teams. Any teams get 20? You're still working on it? Oh, okay, cool. Go ahead and grade the team. If you haven't finished grading the teams, go ahead and grade the teams. And then we'll talk. Okay, everybody good? Have we all, you guys are still going? Almost done? Okay. Okay, I'm just going to count down from 20. When I say how many your table got right, have your table raise your hands, okay? All right, 3, 2, 1, go. 20. Fascinating. 19. Hey. 18. Okay. 17. 16. 15. 14. 13. 12. Any table not raised their hands yet? Interesting. That's the best set of all that we did. That was the best. That is the most calibrated, was the no conversation, just everybody's combined highest and lowest. Who's surprised they didn't get 20? Yeah. Anybody saved by an absurd idiot at their table who had a ridiculous range? Yeah? Yeah. I'm not kidding. I'm teaching this to you. I just was doing this a few days ago, and I was like, these guys are crazy. Their ranges are so huge. No, they weren't. And I know the answers. I was just like, you guys are being ridiculous. Like, that's way too wide. No, it wasn't. The only one that they got right, they actually hit 18 of 20. It was just a small team of 3. But they hit 18 of 20 on the last round on only putting in the high-low. That was the only time they hit anybody in that group hit 90% across the 3 tests. Note how hard it is. Maybe some of you saw improvement. Maybe some of you bounced around. Note how hard it is to really acknowledge your uncertainty. There's a lot in our brains pushing us to be precise. There's a lot in our brains telling you, that's there's this little voice. It's like, that's too wide. You don't need to go that wide. It's why you use things like the absurdity test. It's why you use bounds as breakpoints. 2 pros, 2 cons. Like, so often, and by the way, I'm not saying every time if you've like a huge stack of things you're estimating, I'm not saying you go through this with all the team and everybody does the whole rigmarole. But hopefully you're seeing this has utility, and also utility in just paying attention, because there were the people you thought were crazy who were actually the only ones that was the only reason your table got that question right. That almost always happens. There's almost always someone, they're like, what in the world, why would you put that number? Oh my goodness, like, what, do you not know anything? And then everybody else is going like, oh, I guess that's me. I was the absurd idiot who didn't know anything, but boy, I was a confident absurd idiot. Again, not mutually exclusive. So I want you to take a couple minutes real quick and just as a group discuss, what are you taking away from this as the solo versus the group, the talking versus the min-max? What did you notice? Just talk at your tables real quick and think about, like, how could you use this in game development? How could you use this with your teams? What are you going to be doing with this? So I'm just going to give you a couple minutes. You can discuss that, and then we'll get into the last section. Yeah, I can't remember who it was. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I hope I did okay. Okay, let's bring it back to the front. Sorry to cut you all off, just to keep us rolling. So as you're thinking about this, I want to point out, some of you may be like, I tried really hard, Ben. I tried to use the techniques, and I still am less than 50% calibrated. Acknowledge that reality. It's okay. The thing that matters over time is, are you getting better? You might be out here right now. You know, you're just learning about this. You're just figuring this out. That's okay. We all start somewhere. By the way, I've been, like I said, teaching this. I've been doing estimation for a very long time. And guess what? I'm still not 90% calibrated. I think I'm probably a little bit better than average. I'm certainly way better than I was. But man, this takes time. Because you're going to go into it, and if you're not paying attention, you won't learn at all. And even when you are, you're going to realize, oh man, why did I think that was only going to take 2 weeks or 3 months or whatever it is? Why did I think that? And again, in retrospect, it's often obvious. But when we're in that moment, we're so sure, we're so confident. And then we'll even buffer it, and we'll add range and do all these different things, and we're still wrong. So don't beat yourself up about the fact if you didn't get better. If you did, great. Think about that idea again of how you do get better over time. Repetition. Track the estimates you make, whether they're guesses about what the future will hold for your company or particular estimates around a team or how many people you thought this would involve or whatever it is. All those different things. Just take a moment, maybe once a week, write down something you predicted about the future and see if it comes true. And give yourself a confidence interval around it. Be like, all right, I'm going to try for 90%, right? Or maybe you're just like, you know what, I'm going to go for 80%. I'm going to go for 80% confidence. Whatever it is, 80% means you get it right 8 times out of 10. And know that you can get better. Like I said, odds makers and bookies are really good at this. They're really good at this. Something I saw, and I don't want to get political, but we just had an election. It was fascinating watching the models versus the betting systems about who was going to win. The models weren't sure. Now, obviously, it wasn't that much of it. Like, they really weren't sure. The betting models weren't sure, too. They were more confident that Trump was going to win. And I thought that was fascinating. They ended up being right. Most of them would have said that it was somewhere between like 60, 65%. But by the time you get to 65%, you're basically saying like, hey, that's a 2 to 1, that's more likely to happen. The betting market was correct, even though the models were not. And that's just these people taking, in some sense, guesses. They're looking at all the models too. They're looking at the data, but they're putting all that together. And in some sense, when you get good at this, your intuition starts working on your behalf. And that's something but it's going to take a long time. So you have to just go through the process of like, you know, if you were today all over the board or you were just always really overconfident, recognize that about yourself. And even when you go into estimation sessions and when somebody asks you for something, you're like, oh, it's 3 weeks. And then go like, wait, I'm often not correct on these things though. So give me a moment. I'm going to go talk to some other people and ask them without anchoring them. And then I'm going to see what they say. And I'm going to go like, okay, hey, blah, 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 this is the scenario, blah, 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 what do you think? And they say 8, and I'm like, okay. Well, I know I'm overconfident. Maybe 8 is a better guess. Or maybe I should go like 3 to 8, right? That would be my range. So you can do these sorts of things. All right, this is technically the end of the initial part of the slide deck. We've got an option because there's a little bit more time on the clock. So we can either go, I can do Q&A. I'll just wrap this real quick. We do Q&A. I also have a small section as an appendix in case there was extra time where I talk about accuracy versus precision. So if you want to go into the Q&A, I'm just basically going to give you 2 options. If you want to go into Q&A, raise your hands. Okay, a couple people. Don't worry, I will be doing questions after. If you want to go into the accuracy versus precision section, raise your hands. Okay, so that one wins. All right, so we'll go into accuracy versus precision, so I'm just going to skip through a couple real quick. All right. Accuracy versus precision. I've mentioned these terms. I want to be really clear about what I mean when I say them. So accuracy is, and this is where you can be roughly accurate, you can be precisely accurate. There's a lot of different ways you can view accuracy. But accuracy means that you're roughly on the target. Precision is different. Precision means that even if you're wrong, you could be consistently wrong. But I'm precisely going to the same point every time. And so when I first asked you for a 90% confidence interval, and a lot of you were incorrect, many of you were being overly precise. You were not being accurate. And again, an accurate range for any of those questions that I gave would be negative to positive infinity. It's a uselessly rough, but accurate range. But it's completely imprecise. Now, when we tighten that in, we go to a place where we say like, well, it's 5 to 10, right, or whatever, and that might be very precise, but we may have lost accuracy. I have seen arguments in game development for both. I know that there are some people who say, what I want is precision and we'll get accurate over time. I disagree with that. I encourage people to aim for accuracy, and this is why. What if there was no target? Because we actually often don't have a target. Unlike when we're shooting or like doing archery, whatever it is, when we actually have a target, it makes sense. We can easily see whether we hit or not. But when we're in game development and we estimate something for the future, we don't know what the target is yet. It's sort of all of the future, and it's unknown and it's unclear. And so when I look at these groupings without the target, precision looks way better. This looks way better than that or that. That looks great. Here's the problem. You don't realize you're missing. When you're overly precise without being accurate, you end up being deceptive if there's no target because you don't know. And that was, again, you were all deceiving yourselves on round one. And when you deceive yourselves and then you tell other people the thing that you've deceived yourself with, well, you're unfortunately misleading them as well. And again, it's not intentional deception. It doesn't make you a horrible liar. I've done this to people. I've done this to teams. Gosh, it's kind of embarrassing sometimes when I think back to how many times I did that with teams. And someone would be like, are you on track, Ben? And I'd be like, oh, yeah, we're on track. And I was like, we are not on track. But part of me is like, I can't say that in this meeting, in this context. So I'll just pretend. I think we're going to get. I'll tell myself I think we're going to get back on track. Warning for game development: you never get back on track. It only goes the other way. And there's some reasons why, but I won't go into. But like, trust me. Anytime anybody's like, don't worry, we'll get faster later. No, you might get better at what you're doing, but as you keep going down game development, it gets more complicated. Things get more complex. And so yes, you get better at the simple things, but now you have to put them all together, and that gets hard. So I want you to work on accuracy first. Understand your uncertainty. Be okay with the good. Be okay here. Be okay with it being all over the place, but roughly on the target. And then eventually, maybe sometimes in certain environments where you can actually do it, you'll move towards the best. You'll move towards being accurate and precise. You can always be accurate. You cannot always be precise. No matter how, and there's a curve I show in a different course I do on estimation, where it's just saying like, to get more accurate estimates, people think they just need to put time in. But it's a diminishing returns curve. It's logarithmic. And actually, eventually, it tails down. But we think that if we just keep investing time, if we plan harder, if I get all the leaders or the producers in a room and the project managers and the scrum masters, and we all just plan and plan and plan, and if we really plan hard, I will be able to guess exactly what will happen in the future. And you won't, because you don't know what's going to happen or what's not going to happen. So you have to accept being accurate first. And over time, you will reduce uncertainty. You will become more precise. OK, we're not going to do another calibration test, I don't think. I am going to leave you with one. So if you want to, we're going to, I think, are they already on the tables? Yeah. Great. So you can feel free to grab one. You can look up the answers online if you want to. But if you want to do one more, there you go. You can really, again, focus in on the principles we talked about. And with that, we will go. Oh, yeah, OK. So let's go through. So again, thank you. I want to repeat, a lot of this information came from How to Measure Anything by Douglas Hubbard. 2 books by Daniel Kahneman that were also very helpful. One I read very recently, one I've read a while ago. Thinking Fast and Slow. So Thinking Fast and Slow is a book that's going to help you understand. You have 2 different brain systems, and some people have described them as different parts of like either left or right, or like prefrontal cortex versus amygdala. There's different explanations as to why, but basically you have a fast thinking and a slow thinking part of your brain. The fast thinking is the intuitive part. It's unbelievably helpful. It filters information for you. It allows you to kind of go about normal life without having to think about everything you see. Because if you actually had to think about everything you see all the time, like our brains would explode. We can't do it. So we simplify constantly. And we're humans, we're pattern recognizing creatures, we're really good at it. So your fast thinking system is very important for your survival. Simultaneously, it sometimes leads you the wrong way. Our intuition can get us in trouble. And so slow thinking is required. Our brains don't like slow thinking. They don't like it because it's expensive. And so if you think about humanity, where we came from, when calories are a problem, running the expensive part of your brain is a problem. And because that's the thing, the fast thinking part of you is very cheap. The slow thinking part of you is expensive. You have to stop, you have to think, you have to be like, you can't be doing other things. You have to be like, okay, hang on, what am I doing, right? It's like getting into focus mode when you're trying to do work. It's hard. You need both. And what I'm encouraging you to do is sometimes when you're estimating, not all the time, sometimes you're just going to use the fast thinking and it'll probably be good enough. Like if you asked me how long it would take me to get to my in-laws, to drive to my in-laws, I'm just going to use the fast thinking part of my brain. I'm not going to stop and go like, well, hang on, I need to ask you 17 questions about that. I'm just going to be like, oh, it's about, and now I'm going to spoil the answer. It's about 7.5 hours, except I've got 2 small children, so it's more like 13. But that's about how long it's going to take. Okay, so Daniel Kahneman, Thinking Fast and Slow, really good. Noise, he talks about estimation, how humans relate to it, and actually how, in some cases, the more noise you have in the system, some people will say like, well, it all averages out. He's actually making a case in some of that book that it doesn't. So all these are worthwhile. I think, I'll be honest, how to measure anything, it gets pretty dry. I disagree with the premise. I love a lot of the stuff that's in there. Chapter 5, like I said, will refresh you on everything that we just covered, or not, but most of the stuff we just covered. Thinking fast and slow, noise, also really good. How humans think, how we relate to estimation and things like this. Okay, how to contact me. You can hit me up on my email, go to my website. I've got a LinkedIn. I do a podcast, I do a newsletter. You're welcome to check me out. The thing I'm trying to do is help leaders and producers lead better. I think a lot of times we're focused on the wrong problems, and that's frustrating. And I want to help us focus on the right problems so that we can all build better games, so I get to play more games that are better. We get to make amazing things players love. With that, we'll go to Q&A.
Yeah, hi Ben, thank you so much. Prateek here from Leela Games. So one issue that I want to talk about is related to accuracy versus precision.
Yes.
That you talked about. Now the reason why we got 19 out of 20 in the group round was because the ranges were a little bit absurd, right? Now if we take this premise and go and just take the lowest and the highest bounds, of course in a real team setting we may be accurate, but then that accuracy is a little bit meaningless, because when you have such high values, it's hard to plan a project with those unrealistic values. So you end up needing a slightly tighter bound, but you're not getting that with just taking the lowest and highest values. So you do kind of, it's a little bit less usable in this format.
So
talk about that?
One of the things that's a shame is a lot of the project planning tools we use don't really account for ranges well.
Yeah.
They tend to give like, hey, how long is this going to take? Okay, cool, I'll Gantt chart that out with everything else. And here's my project plan. What I would say is if you have a high and a low, pick whichever one is the later or the one that is more problematic and use that as the default. So don't use the high range. Now, in the case where there are absurd numbers, this is like what I was talking about earlier. You need to change the environment. If you end up with an absurd number, but that's the real number, nobody has a good reason why it should come down. Like again, imagine we're making a feature and we do this as a group for some reason, right? And I'm not saying you run your whole team through this with a giant stack of things. It'll take hours and hours and hours. You're trying to teach them the principles of it. But let's say you get to that place and it's like, well, this feature is going to take 4 years. And you go, well, it can't take 4 years. I can look at that as a project planning problem, or I can look at that as like, well, wait a minute, what does that mean about the viability of what we're doing? Do I need to shift what I'm doing? Do I need to de-scope something? Do I need to reduce the uncertainty in some other way? And start asking the question, well, what would make this number come down from 4 years? What would bring it, I'm really only okay taking on this work if it's 12 months or less, or 3 months or less. Okay, cool. Well, what's the problem? Why is it going to take that long? And use it as a jumping off point for a discussion of both why is it 4 years from somebody, and what would it mean for that person to bring it down? And I'll give an example of a team. This is I had a business partner named Aaron for a while. He worked with a team, and they were doing estimation, and they were doing sort of your classic poker planning. Everybody holds up a card at the same time kind of thing. And they had the whole group. They all threw up numbers, and they got a range. I think maybe 8 was the average or something, but the QA was like infinity. And everybody was like, okay, come on. And then so everybody just talked at the QA, and they were like, hey, this is why you're wrong. And so then they're like, okay, cool, let's everybody go again. And they all went again, and everybody else was like, yeah, they narrowed in on the 8, and the QA still said infinity. And they were like, well, okay. All right, so they talked to him again. They like, okay, cool, QA, you clearly don't understand, this isn't that hard, blah, 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 blah. He held up infinity a third time. Finally, they asked him the question, why are you infinity? He said, I have no idea how to test this. And they all went, oh shoot. And they did another round, and suddenly the number was way higher. Sometimes there's something real behind the absurd number. And even though you all said, this is absurd. Why did you give that wide a range and this and that and the other? None of the tables hit 20. None of you were perfect, even with that. And so you don't necessarily have to put that into the project plan. There may be something else that makes more sense there. But use it as a jumping off place for a conversation to understand why somebody has that high a number. Maybe it's easy to talk them down, but be careful. Because if you're really confident and they're not, they might be right and you might be wrong, and you're going to figure that out. And the fact that your project plan is off is going to be way less important than the fact that your company just ran out of money because you didn't have time to get that done. So.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much.
Hi, Ben. Thank you for the session. So my question is, like I've built products for a very long time, and everything that you talked about is very realistic and happens every day. Now, we took away something from this session, but the chances are that the people that we are dealing with are not a part of this session and would not understand, right?
Yep.
I can't bring them to your session. I can't ask them to read books. So is there a very quick way of making the larger audience accept uncertainty, as well as accept ranges for estimation versus, that precise answer that everyone wants to hear? Like, are there some quick ways of dealing with scenarios where, your stakeholders are expecting like a precise answer, but that's not the right thing to do?
Yeah. So the simple one is, again, you go to the one answer and it's the later one. And you see what happens. And actually, it's interesting how sometimes we assume that it will be a problem. When you give it to the leaders, you assume like, well, they won't accept that. And I would say, maybe not. And if you really know that, I'm not saying endanger your job by saying it's going to take 4 years or something like that, right? But sometimes it might be worth it to actually try and say, hey, look, the earliest we think this might be able to get done is here. But I'm also really concerned it's going to take a lot longer than that. And I want to talk to you about why and how you might be able to help move this more towards the lower number. Because again, the estimate is the understanding of the uncertainty. Now we get to explore the uncertainty. You don't have to explain to them any of this stuff. You don't even have to talk about ranges with them. Even if you just give them the later number and they go, wait a minute, that seems really late. And you go, yeah, let me walk you through why. This is a similar project we did 2 years ago. I know a lot of people thought this might take not as much time, but I don't see a significant difference between that project that ended up taking 8 months and this one. And so when I'm doing my estimate, I'm thinking, that's a good base point. And they go, oh, shoot, okay. Well, how could, and again, now you might start getting the right conversation. Now, look, I don't want to encourage people endanger their careers and stubbornly say no, I only operate in ranges now. I get it. We have to pay, I call it organizational tax. We have to pay organizational tax to the leaders around us, to the systems that are part of this. We have to make the project plan. We have to also recognize that sometimes what goes into there isn't a good reflection of reality. And how are we rapidly, over time, reducing that uncertainty or learning that and reflecting that? So I had an example of this when I was doing the Summoner's Rift update back in 2013 and 2014 for League of Legends. That was actually that time. I had a senior leader. I was in the room. We were I'd set out this big plan. I'd talked to everybody on the team, and the leaders had all put in the things, and this is how long it was going to take. And we were 1 month in, and we had not gotten nearly as much done as they'd said. But they were all telling me no, don't worry, we're totally going to catch up. We're going to get, it was just the bumps at the start. It's okay, that always happens. We're going to get faster. Don't worry, we'll catch up. And so I had the guy who eventually became the executive producer of League of Legends, Joe Tung, ask me point blank in the room, are you on track? And I knew we weren't where we were supposed to be, but it was more convenient for me to buy the lie that everybody was telling me and just go yes. And he was okay. And I broke trust with Joe Tung on that day. And he knew, and he remembered that. And I remembered that. And I didn't like having done that. And the interesting thing is Joe Tung was not a guy who would have gotten mad at me for giving him a real answer. But I thought he might. And I was some associate producer, and he's this super senior guy who shipped 1 million things. And it pushed me into a place where I gave him not the truth. The next time when I redid how we estimated and actually got a better picture, which took me a while to figure out, I was accurate a year out to within a month. and actually a little bit tighter than that. But it was about a month off, about a year out. With a 50-person project, that's pretty good. Most people were pretty impressed. Nobody thought my estimate was right. The whole team said I was stupid. They were like, "You're crazy. We're going to be done way before then." I'm like, I'd be happy to be wrong, and I hope to help us. I hope to help me be wrong. But this is what the data is showing about how fast we're moving through the work. And they were like, "Whatever, stupid producer." And a year later, I had one of them come to me and I said, he's just like, "I don't know how you did that." And I was like, "It was math. It was like arithmetic. It wasn't even complicated, right? It's so interesting how people don't accept that. But when I told Joe Tung the second number and then I hit it, he was like, "Okay." And it was like, for me, it was a little bit of, I've recovered that trust that I lost by telling you what you wanted to hear instead of telling you the truth. So I don't know who the leaders are around you. I don't know if that's how it'll go. I would say have a little bit of courage, take a little bit of risk, see what happens. You might get better outcomes than you think, and if you don't, then you have to play the system of the organization you're in, but be aware of it, talk to your team about it, and again, don't get stuck thinking like, well, we can only be this is a conversation starter. It's an acknowledgement of uncertainty. And even just knowing that, it'll help you as you go forward.
Thank you.
Hello, yeah. So I wanted to ask about how estimation is also linked to, how well you are able to prioritize. So estimation linked to prioritization.
Yeah.
And another aspect is trying to always, discuss about are we making the most important thing right now, right? So trying to not look at estimation just in isolation, but with prioritization and what brings value.
Yes. So I love what you called out, because to prioritize properly, you can do rough prioritization without estimation, but estimation is important because you can't get, when you prioritize, you're prioritizing to what's the most valuable thing, and if I don't know the cost, it's hard for me to say what's the highest value to cost from a ratio perspective, which is what matters. So I do estimation to give me a picture of that. If I don't trust my estimates, that gets really wonky. Now, on average, I could say that even if you're not estimating well, maybe there's some consistency. As an example, this group as a whole, and I've seen this again I think every time I've done this with game dev, tends to be overconfident. So if everybody's at least consistently overconfident, we end up precise in some way, but just if we're consistently precise, I can actually build that into my understanding of prioritization. The challenge would be if your estimation is so wild that I can't understand cost, and so I can't get cost to value, and that's consistent where, I thought this was going to take 3 weeks, and one time it took a day, and the next time it took 4 months, and so I just had no idea. Now we have a problem where that endangers the ability to prioritize. But this is where don't think of it as a one-time thing. When you're doing prioritization and you're integrating estimation into that to get a better understanding of what's most important, if you're doing that regularly, even if it's just a small group of leaders, I had a team. They weren't doing this very well. I kind of got the product lead and the engineering lead in a room. And I was with them for the first few times. Then once they got the handle on it, I just sort of let them do it on their own. But I think it was every 2 weeks. Maybe it was once a month. But I think it was every 2 weeks. They just got in a room and looked at all the stuff. And that meant that they were learning as they went. And they were learning kind of where we were wrong and why we were wrong and these sorts of things. So don't view it as a one-time shot, right? Okay, we prioritized at the beginning of the project, keep revisiting it, and then even if you're wrong, you'll kind of be figuring it out as you go, especially if you're paying attention and learning as you go. So I hope I don't know if that exactly answers the question, but yeah.
All right, if there are any more questions, we'll take them offline. I need to make sure all of you guys have time for lunch as well, right? But this is our first workshop in a while, and I'm glad it was executed so well from Benjamin. I hope you all enjoyed it. Okay, so yeah, if there's any questions, you all can come over for the next 10-15 minutes. We'll have some open round of questions here and can head over for lunch. I think you all have time till 2 o'clock. Okay, thank you.